Ever wonder what could kill 28,000 people in just one day? Welcome to the Battle of Towton, the bloodiest clash on British soil, fought in 1461 during a raging snowstorm. Picture this: tens of thousands of men charging through blinding snow, arrows flying with the wind, and a river turning into a death trap. How did weather turn a battle into a massacre? Stick around as we uncover the brutal tactics, the unforgiving terrain, and the human tragedy that made Towton a turning point in the Wars of the Roses. You won't believe the carnage. What kind of mess do you get when two rival houses fight for a throne in the middle of a snowstorm? Let's talk about the absolute chaos that led to the Battle of Towton in 1461. You've got to imagine England as a total wreck during the Wars of the Roses, a nasty civil war that's got everyone picking teams. On one side, you've got the Yorkists, led by a young and ambitious Edward IV, itching to grab power. On the other, the Lancastrians, with Margaret of Anjou fighting tooth and nail to keep the crown on her husband Henry VI's head. It's not just a little disagreement. It's a full-blown disaster waiting to happen, and nobody back then had any clue just how bad it was going to get. Picture the tension building after a string of smaller fights across the country. Both sides are tired, angry, and ready to throw down, but the stakes couldn't be higher. The Yorkists have just gone and declared Edward king in London, basically slapping the Lancastrians in the face. Meanwhile, Margaret's up north, scrambling to gather every lord she can convince to fight for her cause. She's even got some Scottish warriors backing her up, which shows just how desperate things are. This isn't some petty argument over who gets the family castle. It's the medieval version of an all-out gang war, with entire regions split down the middle. You wouldn't believe how many regular folks got dragged into this mess, forced to pick a side or risk losing everything. Here's the thing that made it even worse. There was this deal called the Act of Accord, meant to sort out who should be king after Henry. Sounds like a fix, right? Nope. It just poured oil on the fire. The deal said Edward's family would take over after Henry died, but Margaret wasn't about to let her son lose his shot at the throne. So instead of calming things down, it pushed both sides right to the edge. Historical records from the time show how fast alliances crumbled, with nobles switching sides or hiding out, hoping to survive the storm. It's like watching a bad reality show, except the prize isn't cash. It's the entire kingdom, and the losers don't just get voted off. You wouldn't believe how personal this fight got. Edward wasn't just some name on a banner. He was a giant of a man, over 6 feet tall, which was huge back then. He led from the front, a living challenge to Henry VI, who was, let's be honest, not exactly a strong ruler. Henry's weak leadership left Margaret running the show, and she was fierce, but Edward's presence on the field was like a dare to everyone watching. It's the medieval version of a stare down before a big fight, except this one's got armies behind it. Every move, every decision, felt like a personal grudge match, with both sides knowing only one could walk away with the crown. So, how did this political storm set the stage for a literal storm of snow and blood? Let's think about why Towton wasn't just another skirmish in the history books. This wasn't a random clash. It was the breaking point after years of bad blood. The real challenge was that neither side could afford to back down. Edward needed to prove he was king in more than name, and Margaret had to secure her family's future, no matter the cost. That stubbornness locked them into a collision course, heading straight for one of the deadliest days Britain has ever seen. Now, let's shift to the ground where this disaster unfolded. You've got to see how the actual land, mixed with some seriously bad weather, turned an already ugly fight into something even worse. Stick with me to find out how nature piled on the pain. Ever tried charging uphill in the snow with a river at your back? Let's talk about the deadly playground that was Towton's battlefield in 1461. I'm not joking when I say this wasn't some neat, pretty field you see in those medieval movies with knights prancing around. Nah, this was a brutal patch of ground that could wear you down before you even swung a sword. Imagine yourself there, stuck between two villages called Saxton and Towton, standing on a wide, open plateau that's anything but friendly. The Lancastrians, defending their king's shaky claim, are perched up high on a ridge, looking down like they've got the upper hand. Meanwhile, the Yorkists, hungry to prove Edward IV is the real deal, are trudging up from the south, staring at a nasty climb ahead. Now, let's paint the picture of this terrain, because it's basically a trap waiting to snap shut. You've got marshes and thick woods hugging the sides of the battlefield, making it tough to sneak around or pull any fancy side moves. Then there's Beck, this little river nearby, winding through the area like a sneaky death sentence. It's not wide, but it's deep enough to mess you up if you're not careful, especially if you're running for your life. There's no easy way to flank the enemy, and forget about retreating without tripping into a disaster. Both armies are locked in, forced to face each other head-on. No tricks, no escape routes. It's the medieval version of being stuck in a tiny boxing ring, except the floor's uneven, and the crowd's throwing snow at you. Forget any ideas of a nice, flat field where you can just charge and get it over with. This ground is a slog, pure and simple. Every single step uphill sucks the energy right out of your legs, and that's before you factor in wearing heavy armor. Think about hauling 50 pounds of metal on your body while trying to keep your footing on a slope that's slick with mud and early spring slush. You're gasping for breath, your boots are slipping, and you've still got to fight once you reach the top, if you even make it that far. Historical maps from back then lay it out clear. The Yorkists had to push straight up Old London Road, an old path that's basically a straight shot into the Lancastrian line. No wiggle room, no way to spread out. It's like walking right into a wall of angry guys with sharp sticks, hoping you don't trip on your way in. Now, picture yourself fighting in those conditions, slipping on snow and mud while nature's barriers box you in. It's not just a battle, it's a medieval cage match where the ground's as much your enemy as the guy swinging at you. The Lancastrians thought they had it made with that high ground, a perfect spot to rain arrows and hold the line. And yeah, at first, it looks like a smart pick. They're up there, looking down at the Yorkists struggling to climb, probably thinking they've got this in the bag. But here's the thing you wouldn't believe. That same terrain's about to turn on them in ways they never saw coming. High ground's great until it's not, and this spot's got a nasty surprise waiting. So, how did this rough patch of earth shape the fight? Let's get to why standing your ground here was a double-edged sword. The downside was that this terrain turned Towton into a grinding meat grinder. If you tried to retreat, you'd likely tumble into the river or get caught in the marshes. If you pushed forward, the climb and the tight space wore you out before the real pain even started. It was a setup for pure exhaustion. Next up, let's see how the weather took this already tough spot and turned it into a living nightmare for both sides. You've got to hear how a storm made things 10 times worse. What happens when a blizzard hits right as you're about to fight for your life? Let's talk about how the weather turned Towton into a bloodbath. You've got to picture this. It's Palm Sunday, March 29th, 1461, and the Yorkists are marching into view, ready to prove Edward IV is the true king. But right as they line up against the Lancastrians on that brutal plateau, a savage snowstorm slams into the battlefield. I'm not talking about a light dusting of snowflakes that makes things look pretty. This is a full-on storm with howling winds blowing straight from the west, turning the air into a wall of icy needles. It's the medieval version of getting sandblasted, except it's freezing cold, and you're stuck outside with no shelter, wearing heavy armor. Now, let's get into the tension this storm brought, because this isn't just a little snow to brush off your shoulders. It's a blinding mess that stings your face and gets into every crack of your gear. You can barely see 10 feet ahead, squinting through the whiteout, while trying to keep your footing on already slippery ground. Worse, the wind is so fierce it's messing with every single arrow shot on the field. Archers on both sides are trying to aim, but the gusts are throwing everything off. Imagine lining up a shot, pulling back your bowstring with frozen fingers, only to watch the wind yank your arrow sideways like it's got a mind of its own. It's chaos before the real fighting even kicks off, and you're stuck wondering how you'll survive the weather, let alone the enemy. Here's the kicker that you wouldn't believe. The wind picks a side. Yeah, seriously, those western gales are blowing right into the Lancastrian faces, while the Yorkists have the breeze at their backs. What does that mean? Yorkist archers, under a sharp commander named Fauconberg, can send their volleys flying far and deadly, slicing through the storm like they've got extra power. Meanwhile, the Lancastrian arrows, shot against the wind, flop short, barely reaching halfway to their targets. It's like trying to throw a paper airplane into a fan. Good luck with that. The Yorkists figure this out fast and start pouring arrows into the enemy lines, turning the snowstorm into a weapon of its own. Accounts from back then paint this archery duel as a horrifying sight. Fauconberg's men time their shots just right, loosing volleys one after another to maximize the damage, while the wind keeps pushing their arrows deeper into Lancastrian ranks. Think about standing there on that ridge, already freezing, your vision blurred by snow, and suddenly thousands of sharp wooden shafts are raining down on you. You can't even shoot back properly, because the gale's working against you. It's not just bad luck, it's a nightmare. Men are dropping left and right before they even get close enough to swing a sword, all because the weather decided to play favorites on this miserable day. The storm didn't just make fighting miserable for everyone involved. It shifted the whole balance of the battle before the hand-to-hand mess even got going. You're trying to hold your ground, shield up, eyes stinging, while your buddies are getting picked off by arrows you can't answer. For the Lancastrians, it's a gut punch right out of the gate, their numbers thinning while the Yorkists barely feel the sting. How bad did this weather screw things up for one army over the other? Let's zero in on that first brutal advantage. The magic of this storm was that it handed the Yorkists a tactical edge, shredding Lancastrian lines before swords or axes could even clash. Now let's move to the actual fighting and see how this early blow played out in the chaos of battle. You've got to hear what happened when the lines finally met in that storm. How do you go from orderly lines to total carnage in just a few hours? Let's talk about the brutal stages of Towton's fight in 1461. After that savage snowstorm gave the Yorkists an edge with their arrows, the battle kicks off with Fauconberg's archers doing some serious damage. They're peppering the Lancastrian lines, sending wave after wave of sharp wooden death through the blinding snow. But here's the trick. They don't just stand there firing all day. Fauconberg pulls his men back a bit, baiting the Lancastrians to come down from their high ground on the ridge. It's like waving a red flag at a bull, and the enemy takes the bait, charging into what quickly becomes a messy, bloody brawl. Imagine thousands of men stumbling down a slippery slope, eager to swing at anything that moves, while the snow's still stinging their faces. Things get ugly fast, and, I mean really ugly. Just when the Yorkists think they've got the upper hand, a nasty surprise hits them hard. Edward Ivy's left flank, already struggling in the storm, gets ambushed from a spot called Castle Hillwood. Out of nowhere, hidden Lancastrian troops burst out, slamming into the Yorkist side like a freight train. Suddenly, Edward's men are on the ropes, fighting not just to win, but to survive. You're in that line, heart pounding, barely able to see through the snow, and now enemies are coming at you from an angle you didn't expect. It's total panic, with the Yorkists scrambling to hold together before they get torn apart in this freezing mess. Now it's not just arrows flying anymore, it's down to the gritty stuff. Men in heavy armor are shoulder to shoulder, swinging polearms, axes, and swords in close quarters. Think about the weight of that gear, dragging you down as you hack away at someone just as tired as you are. The snow keeps falling, piling up on your helmet, getting in your eyes, while the ground underfoot turns to slush and blood. Every swing feels slower, every step harder, but there's no stopping. It's the medieval version of a bar fight that spilled into a blizzard, except instead of fists, it's sharp metal aimed at your head. You can't even hear orders over the wind and screams. You just keep fighting because there's no other choice. Historical accounts from back then paint a grim picture of what went down. Both sides had orders not to hold back, turning the field into a kill or be killed nightmare. There's no mercy here, no taking prisoners. If you fall, you're done, trampled into the mud or finished off quick. You wouldn't believe how fast it turned from strategy to savagery. Imagine being told by your commander that it's win or die, and the other guy's been told the same thing. Every soldier, whether a scared farmer or a seasoned knight, knows there's no backing down, even as the bodies start piling up in the snow. Then comes the panic of a sudden twist. A surprise Lancastrian cavalry charge bursts from those same woods, thundering into Edward's wavering line. It's like a sledgehammer hitting glass, nearly shattering the Yorkist formation. You're already exhausted, and now horses are barreling toward you, riders slashing down from above. It's almost the breaking point, but Edward himself steps in. This giant of a man, towering over most, wades into the chaos, rallying his troops with raw courage. Picture him shouting through the storm, sword in hand, dragging his men back from the edge of collapse. Every phase of this fight pushes both armies to their limits. Hours of grinding violence, with no clear winner. Blood's everywhere, men are dropping, but the tide hasn't turned yet. How did this chaos keep everyone locked in a deadly dance? Let's get to the moment that tipped the scales. The real winner of these early hours was sheer grit, with Edward's personal strength holding the Yorkists together against all odds. Hang tight, because next we're looking at the game changer that turned stubborn defense into a full-on rout. You've got to see what flipped this fight on its head. What's worse than being stuck in a losing fight, waiting for backup that might never show? Let's talk about the Duke of Norfolk's late arrival at Towton in 1461. Picture this. The battle has been raging for hours on that snowy plateau. Both the Yorkists, fighting for Edward IV, and the Lancastrians, defending Henry VI, are utterly spent. They're bloodied, frozen, and barely able to swing a weapon anymore. Men are dropping from exhaustion as much as from wounds, with the Lancastrians still clinging to their spot on the high ground like it's their last hope. The snow's still falling, the wind's still biting, and it feels like this grinding mess could go either way. You're there, aching in every bone, wondering if you'll even make it to sundown, let alone win. Then, out of nowhere, something changes. You squint through the blizzard and see fresh troops marching in from the east, cresting the ridge when all seemed lost. It's the Duke of Norfolk with his Yorkist reinforcements, rolling up like the cavalry in some old movie, except this is real, and the stakes are life or death. These aren't tired, battered soldiers. They're new, rested, and ready to fight. Imagine the boost that gives Edward's army, who've been hanging on by a thread. You're one of those worn-out Yorkists, and suddenly you've got a second wind just seeing friendly banners in the storm. For the first time in hours, there's a flicker of hope that you might actually pull this off. Here's the twist you wouldn't believe. Some old tales paint Norfolk as slow or even sickly, dragging his feet while the battle turned into a meat grinder. People back then whispered he wasn't up to the task, maybe too ill to march fast. But when his men finally hit the field, it doesn't matter why they were late. They slam into the Lancastrian left flank with such force it's like a hammer smashing glass. The enemy line, already stretched thin from hours of fighting, can't handle this fresh wave. You're watching as Norfolk's troops carve through, their weapons swinging with energy nobody else has left. It's not just a push, it's a wrecking ball to an already crumbling wall. Historical records lay out how this sudden surge breathes new life into Edward's army. What was a painful stalemate, with both sides locked in a bloody hug, turns into a hard shove. The Yorkists, fueled by Norfolk's arrival, start driving the Lancastrians back step by brutal step toward the village of Towton. Think about the ground underfoot, still slick with mud and blood, as the enemy stumbles rearward. You're a Yorkist soldier now, pushing forward, feeling the shift as their resistance starts to crack. Every yell, every swing, gets easier because you can sense they're breaking. It's not just a fight anymore, it's becoming a chase. Picture the Lancastrians on the other side of this. They're already worn down to nothing, hands numb, legs shaking, after hours of holding off Edward's men. Now they've got hundreds of new fighters bearing down on them. Their lines, once tight on that ridge, start to splinter under the pressure. You're one of them, looking over your shoulder for a way out, but the terrain's against you with that river and marsh waiting to trap anyone who runs. It's terror setting in, knowing you can't hold much longer. This isn't just a reinforcement showing up. It's the breaking point that turns a hard fight into a desperate run for survival. How did this latecomer seal the deal for one side? Let's wrap up why Towton's end was so devastating. The real challenge was over once Norfolk arrived, flipping a grueling standoff into a Yorkist rout that left thousands dead or drowning. Now, let's uncover the aftermath and the bones that tell the story of this massacre's true cost. What can skeletons tell us about a battle most have forgotten? Let's talk about the grim evidence dug up from Towton's fields. Fast forward from that snowy, bloody day in 1461 to modern times, where archaeologists have been poking around near the old battlefield. They've found mass graves packed with human remains from that brutal clash during the Wars of the Roses. We're not talking about a handful of bones here or there. These are pits filled with the dead, a stark reminder of just how many lives got snuffed out in a single day. You've got to imagine the weight of history literally buried underfoot, waiting for someone to uncover the story. These aren't just old bones you'd gloss over in a museum. They carry proof of savage, up-close fighting that makes your skin crawl. Many skulls show marks from blunt weapons, bashed in with such force you can tell the blows weren't messing around. Think about getting hit by a warhammer or a mace, heavy enough to crack bone like it's nothing. Other remains have cuts from sharp blades, showing where swords or axes slice through. It's not the medieval version of a quick, clean fight you see in movies. This was personal, messy, and horrifying, with men hacking at each other until one stopped moving. You can almost feel the desperation etched into every fracture. Here's the shocker that'll make you pause. Studies from the Towton Mass Grave Project, which looked closely at these finds, show most of the dead were men in their 20s and 30s. That's young, but not surprising for an army. What hits harder is that some had old scars on their bones, healed up wounds from fights they'd survived before. These guys weren't new to war. They'd been through the ringer already, only to end up in a snowy field getting finished off. Picture a guy who's fought before, maybe even thought he was tough. Now, just another body in a pile. It's a rough way to go after dodging death once or twice already. Digging deeper, the bone analysis, called osteological study if you want to get fancy, points to extreme violence. We're talking injuries so bad it's clear nobody died quick or easy out there. Some skeletons have multiple wounds, like they kept getting hit even after they were down. Imagine the chaos on that field. Snow swirling, no mercy in sight, and a guy just keeps swinging at you until there's nothing left. One poor soul might have a smashed face from a club, then a sliced arm from a last desperate swipe. These weren't Hollywood deaths. They were slow, painful, and terrifying. Now, think about the lives behind these remains. These were ordinary folks, farmers, blacksmiths, maybe a few trained knights, dragged into a civil war that tore England in half. Some were likely forced to fight, others joined for loyalty or a paycheck. Now they're speaking through their wounds, telling us about the price of picking sides in a royal mess. You wouldn't believe how much a single cracked rib or a shattered jawbone can say about a life cut short. It's like reading a tragic diary written in bone, each mark a story of that awful day. Beyond the graves, artifacts scattered around help map out the disaster. Things like metal buckles, leather straps, even bits of armor show where men fell or ran in panic during the rout. Archaeologists traced these finds along paths leading to Cockbeck River, where many drowned trying to escape. Picture dropping your gear, sprinting for safety, only to slip into icy water with no way out. How do these finds rewrite what we thought we knew? Let's get to the human cost that numbers alone can't capture. Archaeological evidence shows Towton wasn't just a big battle, it was a personal tragedy for thousands, etched into their very bones. So why did 28,000 people die in a single day at a battle most have never heard of? Finally, let's wrap up with what Towton meant for England and why it still matters today. Towton wasn't just a battle, it was the day England bled white. It's a brutal reminder of how weather, terrain, and raw ambition can turn a fight into a massacre. If you're as stunned by this forgotten bloodbath as we are, hit that like button and share your thoughts below. You wouldn't believe how much history hides these grim stories. Check out our other videos on medieval madness for more. Let's keep uncovering history's hidden horrors together. Stick with us for stories that'll make you glad you're living in modern times, far from snowy battlefields.